All right, so here is a little side trip into photo restoration. We're looking at a variety of techniques depending on a variety of issues, right, when you're restoring pictures. And so here's a picture that actually I've already worked a little bit on, and it was a bit catastrophic at first, right? This was the original, a picture that was ripped apart or torn off from some other picture, or whatever the history is. And there's some material in the background here that will need to be addressed as well. But the most important thing, perhaps we can before we work on that, is to just restore the background that's missing here, right? And so what I've gotten it to is to get to that point, and it's really not. It's not magic. It's just a little bit of tedious work. What you want to do is identify perhaps some picture, some part of the picture that's already there that you could say, you know what, we could actually just replicate it there. And how you're going to do that. I mean, you could possibly paint your own trees if you have a good eye for that, and some brushes set up for similar, similar appearance. But short of that, one thing that I would do is use something like the lasso tool here to select a portion of these of the forest here, maybe this much, and I have the selection. Here under the selection menu, I've set it up to show me marching ants and also overlay. So that helps a lot because the overlay then shows in pink what is not selected. And that's perhaps even more important than seeing the marching ants. And then what I want to do is not keep it that crisp. I want to have the edge a little bit softened. So again, on the selection menu, one thing you can do is Gaussian blur or the box filter. That one I like also because it has a show alpha. It shows you a black and white and the grayscale transition here of what is the alpha channel look like now, or what's the selection mask going to look like when you apply that smoothing, right? And so at that point you have something you can pick up in a custom brush, right? Simply with the brush, copy selected as brush, and so now it clears the selection, but you have a brush and you should store and manage a copy. And that's what I did here a little bit earlier, right? So it's a similar area, and let's go minimize that. So with that, you can pick that. You can use the preview mode here for the brush, so that if you're painting on it, of course the size right now is 1 pixel. I need to make sure I actually see something here, and then you should be able to. Let's go pick it. 100, opacity is 0, that's also strange, so I should have it at full opacity. There you go. So you want to make sure that you have the right parameters here. If you want to stamp it down, there's an option here. These 3 dots next to the browse media allows you to say click once first to get the focus on it, and then you can just simply click here and gradually cover the area that you want with that piece of the background. There is perhaps some other techniques like to paint it, but with such an opaque tree background and mix of something like the sky, it's probably best to do a single dab, a single click to paint or to drop a dab copy of it here. And then the other thing too, you will want to give some variety. So use the brush flip horizontal. There's a keyboard shortcut X for that. So when you use X, you can see it's flipping one way to the other. You need to move the mouse to see it updated. So that's the original orientation, and then you can have one this way, then you can have another one back the other way. So there's a couple of ways with this brush flip horizontal to give it more than one appearance, so that way the trees don't all look like they are standing exactly in line the same. And of course you could also do some further adaptation and hide some of the trees. Do the same thing simply with the background now, right? So we'll use the lasso tool again and perhaps grab a portion here that's relatively unaffected by any tears or lines or other streaks and blemishes, and then again do the selection and box filter selection to blur it a little bit, just a tiny little bit, 3 or 4 units, and then pick that up as a new custom brush, and again store it also, Right, make that sort of a mechanical next step. So you have those two. This one was with the background along the horizon with the trees. This one is just with the with the background sky, and so you can stamp it here in different places and gradually build up your background again. And the more you have fluffiness on the edges, softness, the more it'll be difficult to see the transition. But you can also use this now to even hide some of the trees, right? So you could, for instance, say, well, I want some vertical trees gone here, but I need to rotate it. So that's why we have this stored brush. So you can use the scale rotate commands. You could say rotate it this way, so it's a little bit more in a vertical orientation, and then you could perhaps use that. And if the intensity is different, if it's too bright or too dark, don't give it a full 100% opacity. Give it something much less, so you need a few stamps, click a few times here until it completely goes to the level that you want it to be. So work with that. Sometimes there's some other tricks, but that's probably one of the best things to start with. You also can actually get rid of the pattern, the granularity here that you have if you simply drag it around. That makes it a very soft, like an airbrush kind of appearance or disappearance, if that's the right term in this case. And so you can see that pretty quickly you can recreate a background here that's somewhat plausible. I'm going to go back to this brush here with the background with the trees and actually come from the bottom up a little bit, so that as I'm starting at the bottom I do have those trees, and then eventually I stop at the horizon level, so I have the trees where they need to be and the background darkened. Now this area here might need some extra work too, just the same thing. Now there's a couple of other ways to actually restore that, what I just did here, and of course we'll do the same with the beach area here and the water, all of that, basically 3 or 4 more brushes, and to pick up the different pieces of the image that is usable to replicate over on the other side. But there's also another technique, and that's if you have a selection already in place, you don't have to necessarily put it into the brush. So for instance, in this area here, if I want to select this part and say it really should come from this part, that's the same water, the waves look decent, I should be able to just apply that. And so perhaps we'll do the same thing here with the smoothing first, the box, something like that. And so we have a nice little soft edge transition. And by the way, if you ever need to store this selection alone, there's 2 ways to do that. One is you store the image. It also stores the selection, and you can, let's say, if you clear and then go to the options of the stored image, you can see there is a replace alpha. And you can restore the alpha channel that was saved with it. But there's also another option under selection. You can store the selection by itself. Right? So you have a little free-floating copy. You can actually paint in that too. You can do some work on that selection mask. It's a smaller preview, but it works. It has a copy. You're working on the full-size alpha channel that was stored here. Anyway, what I can do is I can select another area now and have it filled over here. So that's under the image menu with the fills. There's a couple of fill tools, and some of them, I think the Poisson feature replacement, that one, the Poisson feature replacement, will let you pick an area from the image that you want to use to have this feature that you're pointing at replaced in that area, right? So if that's actually interesting if you want to have somebody's face over somebody else's neck or something like that. But in this case, I'll simply say, well, I need this area replaced with the same water nearby here. Right, now maybe I don't want this floating log or whatever that is, so be careful not to pick that. Maybe go down a little bit and then do a single click and could not complete. Okay, don't know why. Let's try that again. Image, fill, Poisson. Nope, looks like there's a reason and I have no idea what it is, so we'll try the other techniques. Fill and replacement, color adapting replacement. Well, that worked. So I don't know what's with the Poisson. Maybe there's some other requirements off the top of my head I just don't remember. I don't use these techniques very often, but they are certainly at times very useful. There's also, so that's the color adapting replacement. There's another one-click feature replacement. What that one's going to do is it's going to try to look for something that might be fitting based on what else it sees in the picture. Sometimes that's awesome, and sometimes it just makes no sense. And it can be very time consuming. There's a feature removal fill. That one's just doing a fill, but it's kind of single color, so it's not not what we want in this case, right? So if you don't want to pick it up as a brush, there may be an option or two here under the fill and replace. Let's do just one more here, which is the fill and replacement one click. So that's kind of experimental. Again, it can take very long or be done in a heartbeat, and sometimes it's actually quite usable. So here, I don't know why it picked this area, but it seems to want to suggest that. You clear it, it may actually be fairly decent. It might have a slightly different hue or slightly different brightness, and that's where you might need to do, keep that that selection handy if you want to do a little bit of extra work, because you could always after that adjust the brightness, with the value here, add a little bit more brightness or remove some of it, and further try to mimic the same. Take the overlay away so you have a better comparison side by side, and then with that you should be able to restore that too. So let's go clear the selection, and so that's roughly the techniques for the bigger parts to replace if you have elements in the pictures that you can use. And then of course there's a whole slew of other issues here that we may need to address, and sometimes it's a little bright spot on a dark background. Sometimes, there's some pixels here, they are not really broken parts. Well, this one probably is something I introduced when I restored this part of the background, but you might want to simply use a very small brush, like a small airbrush here, and then set the size to very, very small, like just about 5 pixels, and start painting. Now this is too dark, so what you want to do is first of all pick the color that's actually nearby. So there is a color picker or turkey baster, and the color picker, you can also just use the period, if you have the keyboard focus, that is. Maybe click outside here to get the keyboard focus, or in here. Oh no, it's not. Oh, it's the comma. Sorry, with the comma, you get to pick. You see the color picker. So pick a color that's nearby. That's the one you want to actually fill in here. So now it has that color, and then you might need to still also make sure it's not applying that too harsh, because you may want to a little fluffiness. So do some opacity controls here, and then the step distance also. The step size, you might want to make it a much larger distance. Actually remove this option here, that's the freehand dotted stamp mode. So that way it may actually be able to do a little bit faster on that restoration. I don't know why it's still going so fast. I thought I had it way lower opacity. But maybe I have a custom image. This time I should really have it in matte mode. It is matte mode. Huh. Okay, so I'm missing something. So many parameters, it's quite possible if you did some other work before. And then, at the end of the day, it doesn't look too bad if you add a little bit of darkness to some of these bushes or trees or whatever they are. So that's some of the techniques for restoring. It's not like a single click blemish removal, but it's close. And if you think about it, there's probably a few other tools that you can find of value. It's one thing to have a selection, and we can see now I've selected this area, and sometimes simply doing an image fill, Poisson feature replacement. Again, I don't know why this worked now, so that's good. So I don't know what it had before, but there's a couple of tools like these that you can use to gradually bring back the beauty of the picture. And then of course at times, first of all store and also save to file every once in a while, and actually often. And then sometimes it's interesting if you do a little bit of blur and then sharpening, or a light diffusion blur, like you have the bright parts going out a little bit, and perhaps adjust some of that, so the light parts bleed into the darker parts, and soften it a little bit, right? And then sometimes the sharpening, like a digital image enhance, especially the HSV, hue saturation value, that can add some crisp, but when you have a lot of granular noise, that might be too much. Anyway, so once you apply something, if you like where it's going but it went too far, you can also use the interactive undo. Keep that in mind. That's going between the prior step and the current step, right? So you have a fade, a gradual transition to say, okay, that's too much, that's too little, let's go somewhere in between. And so that's that for the very basics of photographic restoration. Some of the techniques and tools that you will probably find very handy in PD Howler. I was using PD Howler 2020 here, also known as Howler 13. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching.